there was a village and it had a river. And once upon a time, a guy was actually standing at the bank of the river. And soon he actually saw a kid floating in the water. And so he actually jumped up and saved the kid. Soon after, there were more kids actually coming through the river. So more people actually got involved. They jumped in the river and they saved the kids. But after a while, a group of people actually asked a question that where these kids are actually falling in the river at the very first time. And so that's why they went up the river to find the cause. And in the social world, we actually recognize this style of thinking as an upstream thinking. We can further divide the upstream thinking into two different methods. The first one is analysis. Analysis is the method where we actually break down a system into elements. And we study the elements separately. So for an example, a subject like physics or molecular biology that I study, scientists like to break down the cells and study the DNA or proteins separately. So for those kind of scientific subjects, the analysis is the right method. The other one is called the synthesis, and we also know that synthesis method as systems thinking. The systems thinking, on the other hand, it actually builds up the elements, and instead of studying the elements separately, it understands and it studies the interaction between these elements. Because the system actually functions not separately and not through isolated elements, but through the interaction of those elements. And that's why when we are dealing with systematic issues, we need to use a systems thinking. And upstream systems thinking is the foundation of our organization. Now, before we actually move forward, I want everyone to think about a concern, a problem, a social issue that you are deeply concerned with, whether you're seeing it in the community or you're reading it in the everyday news, but you are deeply concerned with, and you're planning, you're hoping, or you're getting involved in the community to actually address that. And once you actually think about that social issue, please see if you can actually find it in here. This is world's top challenging issues that humankind is facing right now. And roots of these global challenges are so deep enough that no matter where we live, we can actually sense its presence in our local communities. And I believe that these global challenges are more dangerous than cancer. Because at least for cancer, we know what the cause is. It's a genetic mutation, so that we can go about finding a cure for the disease. We don't have to actually live up on the surface treating the symptoms, but we can actually go much deeper and find the cause of it. On the other hand, for all these global challenges, we do not know the underlying cause of it. And in order to do that, what we need to use is a systems thinking. And before we actually use the system thinking, we need to understand, first of all, our world, because it's world's challenges. So our world that consists of abiotic factors and biotic factors. And these abiotic and biotic factors all together, they are known as ecosystem. And this ecosystem doesn't actually work in isolation. These entities, they actually strongly interact with one another. And that's why we actually call it ecosystem and not ecoset, because these entities are highly interactive. And that's why it's a system. It's a system, and the entities actually follow a feedback pattern when they actually interact with one another. What it means is that each entity goes through the consequences of their own action in the ecosystem. So for an example, whatever action I'm performing in the society, in the ecosystem, I will be going through the consequences of it. And that's why we can say that our ecosystem follows a strong feedback loop pattern. We have a saying, what goes around comes around, that actually fits very well with the feedback loop pattern of our ecosystem. Another thing is, because of the feedback loop system of our ecosystem, each entity in our ecosystem constantly changing. So these entities aren't static, they're highly dynamic. And just like any other system, our ecosystem also has a purpose to serve. It has a purpose to keep itself in the equilibrium, to keep itself in a homeostasis. And for that, what is required is each of these entities to perform the function symbiotically in the system, synergistically. In other words, harming the rest of the other entities. Because if one entity actually starts harming another entity, then all will be affected. So what we can actually say is that we are highly interconnected and interdependent in our ecosystem. And this is just a diagram, but if we actually look at the actual concept map of the ecosystem, still we can verify all these principles, and still we can come to the exact same conclusion that our ecosystem is built on the principle of interconnectivity, and we are highly interdependent. I still call this concept map a very simple concept map of ecosystem, because still it doesn't give us a complete idea of our interdependence, of our interconnectivity. Because still science actually gives us a little bit understanding how we are interdependent and interconnected, but the whole picture of our interdependence is still beyond our intellectual grasp. But as a humankind, we did understand the importance of building the system on interdependence, on interconnectedness. And that's why we built our political, social, and economic systems that's built on the principle of interconnectedness. And these systems actually exist on top of the ecosystem. And with the exponential growth in the globalization, we are moving close and we are becoming interdependent more than ever before in our history. And it's really nice to have our system that's built on interdependence, because we can actually take advantages of our strength, right? I don't have to actually build my clothes, food, everything. But we can actually assign the tasks to different people, different corporations, different entities who are good at doing that, and we can start taking advantage on that. So we are highly interdependent, and we are building our system that's built on the principle of interconnectedness. But the principle of interconnectedness also actually comes with a sense of responsibility, that we function in our ecosystem with the understanding that our system is interdependent. And what's happening is that we are building our system that's interdependent and interconnected, and our behavior in the system is more based on individualistic perspective. What I mean by that is having the kind of understanding that I am not at all dependent on someone else. My actions do not come back to me. I don't go through the consequences of my own action. And that's what I call individualism. So we are building a system that's interdependent, and we are moving completely in the opposite direction, and we are actually functioning in the system with the sense of individualism. And this gap is increasing day by day, because our awareness of the interdependence is depleting day by day. And because of this gap, the system is actually breaking apart. We are throwing off the system from its equilibrium. And because of that, all the issues start actually arising in our communities, in our society. And right now, we actually understand all these social issues as the global challenges. So I do want to actually kind of talk about a couple of examples that what actually happens when we forget our interdependence. And we actually work in our ecosystem with a very simplistic mindset, that if I push this button and the economy will go up. If I actually pull the lever, the poverty is going to go down. This simplistic perspective actually doesn't work. And whenever we take this approach, the disaster, the impact is really massive. So for this one, this is actually an aerial view of Aral Sea. And Soviet Union in 1960s, they actually wanted to become a leader in export of white gold. That's called cotton. So they really wanted to actually boost up their economy by growing the cotton and exporting it to the various nations. So what they did is they actually diverted two main rivers that was feeding into the Aral Sea. And within 50 years, the entire sea actually shrunk down. And now what's left is basically a desert. A desert where you can actually find abandoned fishing boats. And it'll take a whole presentation for me to kind of explain its impact on the social, economic, as well as environmental systems. But we can just imagine the vast impact of this kind of government actions. And again, this is because of the simplistic thinking that if I actually just divert those rivers, I'll probably boost up my economy. And also, in our own country, we have the very similar example, right? In 1930s, where the government actually allowed unsustainable farming practices, which actually caused the soil erosion. And as a result, there were several dust storms. And one day, I think there was 1934, 12 million tons of dirt that was accumulated in Chicago. 400,000 people actually migrated in America. And more people actually came to a Bay Area than during the gold rush. So when we actually think that just building a wall will actually help my country with the immigration issue, is definitely not going to work. It's a very simplistic thinking. The simplistic thinking, we cannot actually grab a scalpel and start doing the brain surgery. We have to understand that human body is actually interconnected system, and we have to understand every organ. We have to understand that organs are not separate entities, they are interconnected. And that's the kind of mentality that we actually need in a government. And when simplistic thinkers, they enter in the government just thinking that they'll tweak and manipulate the system and they'll actually solve the problems, this is the level of disaster that we can actually see. The system is very complicated, it's very complex, and when we try and manipulate it without understanding its nature, it gives us the result that's completely opposite to what we exactly desired. So, the moral of the story is that it's really important for us to be a simplistic, the system thinkers. If we really want to enter in a government and try and actually work on the social issues. And the good thing is that the nature has gifted us an ability to live with harmony in our interconnected ecosystem. And this gift is called empathy. The empathy is defined as ability to perceive the world through the eyes of the others. And we have parts of our brain that now neuropsychology is actually trying to understand that which part is associated with empathy. And based on its function, the empathy is classified into three main categories. The first one is called a reflexive empathy, and it's associated with the premotor area, where actually the mirror neurons are. And what it does is that whenever you see someone in a pain, you actually feel the exact same set of emotions. Doctors and nurses, they often actually observe that in a hospital, when one kid cries, the rest of the other kids also cry. Nobody teaches them empathy. Nobody tries to develop that skill set. They're actually born with it. And the other one is called emotional empathy, where I don't really need to visualize or hear the sound of someone suffering or being in the pain. Just knowing that someone is in the pain, it elicits that emotion in my brain, and we can feel and experience the emotion. And this emotional empathy is actually associated with a limbic system. And as you can see that because the reflexive as well as the emotional empathy, they both are very much related, they are very much similar, they are connected by the insular cortex. So nature has well designed us to live in a very interconnected ecosystem through a sense of empathy for others. The last one is cognitive empathy. And cognitive empathy allows us to imagine someone's situations and world through someone's eyes. And cognitive empathy is the one that actually helps social workers and many other people to work effectively towards addressing the issue. Because if a person actually is completely submerged into an emotion, won't be able to perform the right action. So that's why for those people, those activists, the cognitive empathy is the one. The emotional empathy is really important when we do not actually care about the issue and we want to start caring about the issue. So for that, it's really important for me to experience someone's pain emotionally. And once I actually experience someone's pain, then the cognitive empathy can come into the picture, and then I can start addressing the issue in the world. So, the message is clear that the system thinking, the interdependent world, as well as the sense of empathy for others, has to go side by side in order to create a systemic harmony. If one actually falls apart, the other follows. I have to understand that I'm interdependent and I'm interconnected with my community, and then only I can actually start empathizing with others. Otherwise, people will say, why do I need to actually care about someone else? Why do I need to empathize with someone else? And when one of this actually falls apart, the other actually also falls, and this equation turns into individualism plus apathy equals systemic chaos. And that's what we are seeing right now. And as a result, we are actually facing all these challenges right now.